Hello, I'm Jen. Welcome back to my channel, Literary Love 123, where I combine my master's in English with my passion for the horror genre to talk about the books that I read. Today's video is a Summerween 2025 vlog. I'll be right back after this intro and we'll get into all the Summerween spookiness. Full disclaimer, I am late in my decision to start a Summerween reading vlog because Summerween goes from July 5th through July 12th, and today is July 10th. Clearly, I will be extending my Summerween past the 12th. The official Summerween dates, of course, come from Gabby Reads, and I'm sure if you're on BookTube, you know all about Gabby and her awesome channel and the annual event Summerween. So I've already read a couple of books before I decided to do this vlog, and neither one of them were favorites for me So I really didn't want to talk much about them. One of them that I read is Frankenstein, Prodigal Son by Dean Koontz. It's the first in Dean Koontz's Frankenstein series. It was my first book from Dean Koontz. I really never had any intention to read Dean Koontz, but I promised my wonderful friend Travis that I would give Dean Koontz a chance. So I ended up giving Frankenstein Prodigal Son 2.75, but I rounded it up to 3 for Goodreads. It is a story about it's kind of hard to explain. There's a lot going on. You have a serial killer in New Orleans. You have a character named Deucalion, who was a creation of Victor Frankenstein's. Victor Frankenstein has renamed himself to Victor Helios. It's set in current times in New Orleans. So you have a police procedural aspect. You have Victor trying to create this army of his own superior creations to take over humans. There are other creations of Victors that are going about and doing different things. There is a lot going on. So that's really all I want to say about Frankenstein Prodigal Son. The next book that I read was 6 Rooms by Gemma Amor. Gemma Amor is one of my favorite authors. I love Full Immersion, The Folly, Dear Laura, White Pines, The Once Yellow House, her short story collection, All Who Wander Are Lost. Unfortunately, 6 Rooms was my first Gemma Amor book that just did not work for me. So in 6 Rooms, you're following a tour where people are going to explore the Sunshire house. And I really can't say a lot because it's a novella. I don't want to spoil anything, but some terrible things happened at this Sunshire. Is it a chateau? It's some special, house that's just like ridiculously opulent and decadent, and the architecture is a little bit off. The rooms seem to switch and change, which I like that aspect, that idea of a a place being haunted by its past trauma and horrible things that happened, and then those things kind of influencing the people who are on the tour, because most of the people who are going on this tour are not really very likable. So they're being affected by the house and also affected by their own internal issues. But it just was sort of boring in some ways to me, and a little bit over explain, like kind of in your face stuff. And I didn't care for 6 Rooms. And it makes me really sad because that is the first Gemma Amor book that I didn't like. So let me just now move on to talk about the book that I will be reading during this vlog. I've already read 2 of the stories in the collection, but the collection I'm talking about is, ooh, that ring light. Good for Her, an anthology of women's rage. It is edited by Sarah Jules, Shauna McElhaney, and T.C. Parker. And let me just give you a little bit of the synopsis. If you're not angry, you should be. Good for Her, an anthology of women's rage, celebrates women's rights and women's wrongs. Filled with rage, revenge, and retribution, and featuring stories from Aji Yang, R.J. Joseph, Haley Piper, Candace Nola, M.J. Mars, Lee Kinney, Anna Orridge, Elizabeth J. Brown, S.H. Cooper, Megan Stockton, Emerald O'Brien, Lisa Hutchinson, Sarah Jules, T.C. Parker, and Shauna McElhaney. Good for Her is pure catharsis. This book is published by Nefarious Bat Press. And another aspect of the book that I want to talk about is that the proceeds are going to Sisters Uncut. So let me find the part that tells you a little bit more about Sisters Uncut. 100% of the profits from this anthology will be donated to Sisters Uncut, a charity supporting women and gender variant people at risk of domestic violence. So you can rest assured your anger will be put to good use. And again, this is an anthology of women's rage. Good for Her. All proceeds going to Sisters Uncut. So I've read the first 2 stories, as I mentioned. And the first story is called Patient, and it's written by M.J. Mars. And it is set in the future in 2036. And women have fewer rights than they do right now, where we find ourselves in 2025. So that's a bleak thought. The short story opens up with a newscast announcing that there is a tainting of the egg supply, and it was done by this vigilante women's group that goes by the name of Pope Joan. Pope Joan released a statement that they had tainted the eggs with something that would make men get pregnant. And so, as it turns out, men indeed do get pregnant from whatever was put into these eggs. And while on the surface that might seem like a silly premise, as you get into this story, it really provides a deep discussion about women's bodily autonomy or lack thereof, women's reproductive rights. But when it is men who are faced with these pregnancies, the government, as you can imagine, has a much different response to men's rights over their own bodies. I can't really say anything else, but I will say that this is a nuanced approach. And I will say also that there are men who do not want to be pregnant, but then there are also men who do want to be pregnant. And that, to me, really hones in on the idea and the concept of choice. It should be a woman's choice. I can't really say any more about it, but it really has stuck with me since I read it a few days ago and just continually made me think about where we find ourselves now and what that means for the future and for women and for men and for society in general. So let me go ahead now to the second story, which is Babs, written by Anna Orridge. So again, these stories are very short. Patient was 22 pages. Babs is, I should have done this first. Babs is like 12 pages, But in Babs, you have an older woman who is protective of nature, and she takes care of a man who is not so protective of nature. He's polluting the water supply, and she, as I mentioned, just takes care of him. The next story is titled Defensive Architecture, and it's written by T.C. Parker. So I will be back in the next check-in to talk to you about that story and a few others that I read between now and then. I'll also be putting up some B-roll of the Summerween day I had with one of my older daughters yesterday, and some B-roll of some out and about Summerween shopping that I did. So I will see you in the next check-in. Bye for now.
You always keep me guessing. I never seem to know what you are thinking. And if I fell look, you always keep me guessing. I never seem to know what you are thinking. And if I fell look, you always keep me guessing. I never seem to know what you are thinking. And if I fell look.
Hello, it is Saturday, July 12th, around 12:30 in the afternoon. I did not check in yesterday. It was a busy day. I had an appointment with my neurologist yesterday morning. Then Tim and I went to look around Home Goods. Yes, I will have some B-roll of that in just a little while after this clip. Then we went to lunch, and then we picked up our daughter from camp. So, since I checked in last time, I've read 3 more stories in Good for Her, an anthology of women's rage. So I will talk briefly about those 3 stories. So the first one I read since I last checked in is Defensive Architecture by T.C. Parker. That story is 19 pages, and it has to do with the homeless population and how very, very much they are mistreated. The second story I read since last time was A Change in Universal Flavor by Haley Piper. That was 16 pages, and I really don't know how to describe that one. I didn't quite understand exactly what was going on, but it did have to do with I presume it's going to be a young woman who had been arrested a few times. She had some underage drinking charges, some involvement with, I guess, like drugs and things like that. And it was how the police officers were trying to get her to be like, an informant, so to speak, and wear a wire and have drugs and try to sell them to other people. So that they told her that would kind of give her a chance to maybe not get as much punishment or whatever the case may be. But she was dealing with the decision to save herself, and in doing so cause other people to, be arrested to face jail or prison time. So it was that moral dilemma of saving herself but harming other people, or just saying, forget it all, I'm not going to do this. But there was a weird aspect with an angel or angel like figure, and I'm just not quite sure I understood where that story was going. The next one I read was Plague Doctor by S.H. Cooper. That was 10 pages. That's my favorite story in the collection so far. It's the first one where I felt very passionately about it being good for her. Excuse me, good for her. Not that the other ones weren't, but this one hit particularly hard for me in the good for her realm. This one is about, I can't really say specifically, but it does have to do with women's bodily autonomy, women's right to live versus a a fetus, or a husband's ability to make a decision about his wife's life, and a certain person later on finding out a certain thing. I know I'm speaking very cryptically, but finding out a certain thing about situations and avenging a friend's death and taking down parties that are responsible for her friend's death, but also in the broader scope of things, certain individuals who are causing these things to happen to other women. It was, as I mentioned, one that I really said good for her. So that is all for now, other than I will definitely be extending my Summerween past today, past July 12th. I don't know for how long. It really depends on how long it takes me to finish the last 12 stories, and good for her. So after I read a few more, I'll be back with another check in. Meanwhile, you can enjoy my trip to Home Goods. I'll see you in the next clip. Bye for now. Hello, it is Sunday, July 13th, around 3:30 in the afternoon. Yes, you'll notice a bookshelf behind me. This is still a work in progress. I ordered the same type of bookshelves at the same time from the same place, but for some reason, one of them got here Friday and the other one is not supposed to get here until Tuesday. So this is a work in progress. Halfway there. But we're here mostly to talk about Summerween, and good for her. This book I've been talking about in the last check-ins. I've read 3 more stories since I last spoke with you. So let me get those notes real quick and I'll talk about the stories that I read. So the first one I've read since last time I checked in was Phoenix Rising by R.J. Joseph. That was very short. It was only 8 pages long. So our main character, Petra, the story opens up with her going into a nail salon to get a basic manicure and pedicure. She's really trying to move up in her current situation. She wants to have the money to leave her asshole of a husband. She wants to be able to be promoted in her company. And she really needs to have that manicure and pedicure to, she feels like, to make herself more presentable. But she's having to do it as least expensive as possible because her husband will be a real jerk to her about doing something for herself. Although he, for himself, gets the finer things. Of course he does. But it also had commentary on the main character, how she, as a Black woman, was being overlooked in her workplace for promotions. That even though she was working harder than everyone else, she was still not able to move up the ranks as she should have been able to do. But she gets more than she bargained for in a good way when she goes in to have her manicure and pedicure. This was another one that I felt like was really, really good for her. So far, this one, Phoenix Rising, and the one I read before that one and talked about in the last check-in, Plague Daughter, those are my 2 favorites at this point. The next story I read was My Pretty Little Psycho by Elizabeth J. Brown. 19 pages, heavy, heavy trigger and content warnings for this one. There is SA in it. It also deals with mental illness. So make sure you check content warnings, really, I would say even before you pick this book up. But so far, I would say most especially for My Pretty Little Psycho, it opens up with the main character having been kidnapped by someone. And it continues with the ways in which she tries to get out of the situation that she's in. She's also unable to take her medication that she needs to be able to function with the mental illness that she has. So that one was very hard to read, but I think it had a good impact. It was just very, very difficult as far as content. The next one I read is To Love and Obey by Sarah Jules. It was 10 pages. This story has commentary on what if not only were women in society expected to give birth to children, but what if they were also expected to be the breadwinner? So it was like part of it is what women are expected by society to do anyway, as far as giving birth to children. And then the other part was about the expectations on men and what would happen if those expectations were all on women, and you would typically have the man in this society staying home to take care of the home and children. And it also was about women who would even want to have a choice not to have children. That's not an option in this particular society. If you have not had a child by 35, you get put into the spinsters camp and you're expected to work there. Also, content and trigger warnings for this one because the government demands that you have your child before the age of 35, because after the age of 35, there are increased risk for your child having a developmental delay or a disability. So this was also heavy on a commentary about the things that we're seeing play out right now in our current state when it comes to this type of situation with individuals who have special needs, of which my daughter is one. So that one was difficult in that respect. So again, just make sure that you are taking care of yourself before you go into these stories. So I have 9 stories left, and I will check back in with you after I've read a few more. Again, work in progress back here, so pardon the work, and I'll see you in the next check-in. So bye for now. Hello again. It's Monday morning, July 14th. It is around 9:30, and I'm back to tell you about 3 more stories that I read in Good for Her. So the first one I read since the last time we checked in was Picking Up the Pieces by Candace Nola. This story was very short, only 6 pages, and we follow the main character Jane as she gets revenge on her shitty mom and her shitty husband. The next story that I read is Roses for His Garden by Ah Jiang. Very short, 4 pages. And this one is about, again, like we've talked about, or I've talked about, you haven't talked about it with me. Hopefully you will in the comments. But in previous stories, we also had the theme of a woman who chooses not to have children. So again, that was the theme in Roses for His Garden. And the last one I read since I checked in with you is The Savage Other by Lee Kinney. That one was 14 pages. In this story, we follow a missionary who has gone to speak to a, in his terms, savage other, group that terms as savages. And we'll just say that the leader of this group is a woman, and she gets revenge on this guy because we do find out that he never really had intentions to speak to them and try to convert them to Christianity. He more or less was just going to go back and tell the authorities that they refused to convert, and that would give the church authorities a reason to just wipe these people out. So that story was very interesting, to say the least, and I enjoyed it. So I'll be back. I only have 6 more stories, so depending on how my day goes, I may finish all 6, come back and do a check-in and wrap the vlog up, but we'll see how it goes. At any rate, I will see you in the next check-in. So bye for now. Hello, it is Tuesday, July 15th, around 9 in the morning, and I did finish Good for Her. And I want to talk about the last few stories in the collection. So, the first one that I read since my last check in is The Hunt by Emerald O'Brien. This story is 15 pages, and it is a commentary on stalking and how little can be done when someone is being stalked, and nothing can really happen to the stalker until there's some sort of physical altercation. And it also had to do with the connection between women and how we can all be sisters to one another. And aside from the story itself, the imagery and the figurative language in the story were very compelling. So I definitely looked for some more works by Emerald O'Brien. The next story is not is not actually a story. It's a poem, Teacups by Candace Nola. And I'll just read the first stanza to you in this poem because I can't really necessarily talk about what it's about, but just to give you an idea. I am not whiskey in a teacup. I am boiling lava in an open crater, seething under coal and color makeup. I liked this poem a lot. It was a powerful poem, and I'm always interested in more horror poetry. I have a collection. This is like a quick little note. You've probably heard me talk about it before. I didn't bring it up here because I didn't know I was going to talk about it, but I Am Not Your Final Girl by Claire C. Holland. And if you have any recommendations for horror poetry, please let me know in the comments because I definitely want to read more. So the next story is Boss Bitch by Megan Stockton. It was 10 pages. So our main character works for I think it's like a publishing company, and the boss is a real piece of work, a real jerk, very much only about money and doesn't care about the employees. And maybe our main character ends up getting revenge on the boss by the end. The next story is Return to Sender by Shauna McElhaney. It was 17 pages. Again, check content warnings before you go into this book at all. But in particular, this is another story where you have essay. You also have some graphic. I mean, it doesn't go into major graphic, but just something that happens is violent enough without excessive detail. But this one is about an anesthetist, and she encounters some young women in the hospital that were SA'd, and she decides that she's going to handle the person responsible for these. And this one is another one of my favorites in the collection. So it's a totally good for her story. I also looked for more work by Shauna McElhaney after reading that. And the last story is Mandragora by T.C. Parker. It's 24 pages, so it's one of the longer ones, if not the longest in the collection. It is folk horror, and there is a sense of foreboding that you feel pretty much from the beginning. She also has very descriptive language. There was a passage about the trees encroaching. I should have picked it up and made sure I could read that passage to you. But it also has an ending that I didn't see coming. So I definitely recommend Good for Her. Just make sure, as I mentioned, that you check for your content and trigger warnings. But with that being said, this is real life. This is what those of us who identify as women experience on a daily basis. So if the content is disturbing, it's reflecting reality. So keep that in mind as you read it, because there may be some who say that's too far, that's too violent, that's too excessive. Well, hello, look around from the so-called minor experiences that women have in the realm of how we're treated, uh, into bigger pictures of essay of violence against those who identify as women. So art is reflecting life in this case. This book is powerful. Again, 100% of the profits go to Sisters Uncut, which I talked about at the beginning of this vlog. So not only will you be getting an empowering reading experience if you pick up Good for Her, but you will also be supporting other people who really could use the support. So again, thank you for watching this Summerween vlog. Next time you see me in a video, I should have my second bookshelf up. It's going to be delivered today. So I hope you've had a wonderful Summerween. If you participated, let me know what you read. Let me know if you plan to pick up any of the books that I talked about in this video. And if you watched and you're not sure what to say, just leave a little emoji like a ghost for Summerween. I would appreciate it if you would hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that bell so we can continue to talk about the books that we read. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.